The house had never been this clean since his wife died. Ethan Walker stood in the middle of his living room, hands on his hips, scanning the space with the same intensity he once used to review blueprints. The candles flickered softly on the dining table, reflecting off the wine glasses he'd polished twice. He'd even ironed the tablecloth, something his 8-year-old son, Lucas, had found hilariously unnecessary. "Dad, are you nervous?" the boy had asked earlier, sitting cross-legged on the couch while watching his father shuffle around the room like a soldier preparing for inspection. Ethan had tried to laugh it off. "Nervous? Nah. Just making sure things look nice. For your date?" Lucas tilted his head, mischief in his smile. "Is she pretty?" Ethan froze halfway through adjusting a vase of lilies. "Maybe," he said, trying not to smile. "That's not really the point. Mom was pretty," Lucas said simply, and those words innocent, piercing cut through Ethan's chest like glass. He'd looked away then, pretending to check the clock. 3 years had passed, but sometimes it still felt like yesterday. The grief never really left. It just learned to sit quietly in the corner until you looked at it too long. Now, hours later, Lucas was tucked in bed upstairs. Ethan had read him The Secret Garden until the boy's breathing softened. When he'd whispered, "Good night, buddy," Lucas had murmured sleepily, "Good luck on your date, Dad." The words replayed in Ethan's head as he stood before the mirror in the hallway, adjusting his collar for the 5th time. His reflection looked older than he remembered tired eyes, a touch of gray along the jawline but maybe also steadier. The kind of man who could love again, if given the chance. The doorbell rang. His heart leapt into his throat. Ethan straightened instantly, exhaling once before heading to the door. He rehearsed the greeting in his head. "Hi, Madison, you look beautiful tonight." Too much? Maybe just hi. He grabbed the doorknob, smiled nervously, and opened it. The woman standing outside was not what he expected. Madison Cole was radiant in a simple black dress that hugged her curves but somehow managed to look effortless. Her long chestnut hair fell in waves over one shoulder, and her eyes, icy blue yet warm, met his with a spark that knocked the air from his lungs. She smiled, a little shyly, like she already knew how much power she had over the air around her. "Hi," she said, her voice soft, breathy. "You must be Ethan." He managed to nod. "Yeah. Hi, Madison. Please, come in." She stepped inside, her perfume a hint of vanilla and jasmine drifting after her. The atmosphere changed instantly. The quiet suburban home suddenly felt smaller, charged. Ethan tried to remember how to breathe normally. Madison looked around, impressed. "You cleaned up." "I didn't expect a guy to care this much about table settings." Ethan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Architect's curse. Everything has to be in the right place." "That's not a curse," she said, flashing him a teasing smile. "That's attractive." He laughed, genuinely this time, and the ice between them melted a little. She walked toward the table, fingertips brushing the back of a chair, and he couldn't help but notice the faint tremor in her hand. There was something in her posture poise mixed with tension, like someone trying hard to appear calm. "Wine?" he offered, moving toward the counter. "Actually," she hesitated, glancing at the door behind her. "Before that, I should tell you something." He turned, bottle halfway out of the cooler. "Sure." "Everything okay?" She looked straight into his eyes, her expression suddenly stripped of its easy charm. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My kids are outside." The words landed heavy, slicing through the romantic air like a cold draft. Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Your kids?" She nodded slowly, biting her lip. I know how this sounds, but I didn't have anyone to watch them tonight. I thought I could at least come say hi. See you for a bit, and then," Ethan raised a hand gently. Hey. It's okay." He tried to process. She brought her kids? His brain scrambled through a dozen thoughts. Awkwardness. Concern. Curiosity. "How old are they?" 5, she said. "Twins, Ella and Owen." Her voice softened as she said their names, like music that only belonged to her. Ethan exhaled, glancing toward the window. Outside, under the porch light, he could just make out a small SUV parked at the curb. 2 silhouettes in the back seat. Waiting. He ran a hand through his hair. "You left them in the car? They're fine," she said quickly. "Doors locked. Movie playing. I just didn't want to." She stopped, wincing. "God. This is so stupid. You probably think I'm insane." He gave a half smile. "No, just maybe a little spontaneous." She laughed nervously, covering her face for a second. "Yeah, that's me. Madison, the spontaneous disaster." There was something disarming about her honesty, the way she didn't try to fake perfection. Ethan studied her a moment longer, then reached for his coat. "Well, let's not leave them out there. Bring them in. Lucas will be thrilled to have company." Her eyes widened, relief and hesitation mixing. "You sure? I don't want to ruin your night. You already made it interesting," he said with a grin. "Come on." She smiled, that real kind of smile that makes you forget everything else. "Okay." When the front door opened again, cool night air rushed in. Madison jogged to the SUV, her heels clicking against the driveway, and returned with 2 small pajama-clad children. Ella clung to her leg, holding a stuffed rabbit, while Owen hid partly behind his sister. "Guys," Madison whispered gently, "this is Mr. Ethan. Be polite, okay?" Ethan crouched down to their level, smiling warmly. "Hey there. I'm Lucas's dad." Ella peered up, curious. "Where's Lucas?" "He's asleep right now," Ethan said. "But I bet he'd love to meet you tomorrow." Owen whispered something in Ella's ear, and both giggled. Madison shook her head, mortified. "They're usually not this shy." "No worries." Ethan gestured toward the couch. "You all hungry?" "I made too much pasta for 2 people anyway." Her expression softened. "That's really kind of you." As he headed to the kitchen, he couldn't help but feel the universe was playing some strange joke. A first date that turned into an impromptu family dinner at 10 o'clock at night. But when he glanced over his shoulder and saw Madison helping her kids settle in, her eyes sparkling as she tucked a blanket over them, something in his chest warmed. It wasn't the night he planned, but maybe it was the night he needed. Later, as the pasta boiled, he found Madison standing at the window, arms folded. Her reflection in the glass looked thoughtful, distant. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. She turned, smiling faintly. "Yeah, just. It's been a while since anyone let us in this easily." He met her gaze, sensing the weight behind those words. "You'd be surprised how many people understand more than they admit." She looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time that night, her composure wavered. "Ethan, I need to be honest about something else." He frowned slightly. "Go on." "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight." Her voice trembled. "My ex, he's been calling nonstop. He doesn't like me dating anyone. He thinks if he scares people off, I'll just go back." A cold knot formed in Ethan's stomach. "Is that why you looked nervous earlier?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into anything." Ethan set down the spoon he'd been holding. "You didn't drag me anywhere. You showed up. That takes guts." Madison let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing," he said gently. Their eyes locked, the space between them charged. The scent of pasta filled the air, mingling with candlelight and unspoken questions. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stirring, something fragile, dangerous, real. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees. A car engine roared faintly in the distance, then faded. Madison glanced toward the window again, her shoulders tensing. "Did you hear that?" "Probably a neighbor," Ethan said, though a flicker of unease crossed his mind. "Yeah," she murmured, but her tone said she didn't believe it. He wanted to ask more, to dig into the fear he could sense behind her calm mask, but Owen yawned loudly, breaking the tension. Madison smiled at her son, brushing his hair aside, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Normal and yet, not. Something about this woman, her sudden appearance, her whispered confessions, felt like the start of a storm that had just touched the edge of his quiet life. And Ethan Walker, the man who thought he'd sealed his heart for good, found himself standing in the eye of it, half terrified, half alive. Dinner was supposed to be simple pasta, garlic bread, a salad he had overdressed because he panicked with the olive oil. But as they gathered around the coffee table, plates balanced on their laps, the scene felt like a snapshot of a life Ethan had almost forgotten he wanted. The twins giggled through mouthfuls. Ella tried to twirl spaghetti and ended up painting her cheek with sauce. Owen, solemn at first, opened up when Lucas's name came up, asking a dozen quick questions despite never having met him. "Does he like dinosaurs?" Owen asked, eyes bright. "Obsessed," Ethan said. "He's got a T-Rex that roars." Loudly, Ella perked up. "We have a Stegosaurus nightlight. It's pink. It's fierce." Madison smiled, an ease slipping into her shoulders. She sat with one leg tucked under, a sweater thrown over her dress now. Hair slightly mussed from playing human pillow for her kids. The glamour of the first 5 minutes had softened to something warmer, truer. Ethan watched her as if he might blink and she'd vanish. She caught him looking and lifted her brows. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "You just fit here, that's all." A faint blush rose to her cheekbones. She looked down at her plate, suddenly shy. And it did something tender and complicated to his chest. When the twins were finally full and drowsy, Madison nudged them toward the guest room down the hall. Ethan fetched spare blankets while they brushed teeth with 2 tiny toothbrushes he'd kept from a multi-pack souvenirs of a life, with a kid where extras showed up in drawers like hail after a storm. The twins tumbled into bed, whispering secrets no adult would ever be invited to understand. Madison kissed their foreheads, then lingered a moment by the door, listening to their breath even out. "They're okay," Ethan said softly, standing beside her in the low light. "They're safe." Her profile in the doorway, those lashes, the curve of her mouth looked carved out of worry and hope. "They haven't slept well lately," she admitted. "They wake up when I do. Kids can smell fear better than smoke." He wanted to say something heroic, something that would make promises he had no right to make. He settled for the truth. "You're not alone tonight." She looked up at him then, and the gratitude in her eyes wasn't noisy. It was steady. "Thank you." They drifted back toward the living room. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of quiet suburbia sells like a guarantee. The candles on the table had burned into small bowls of liquid flame. Ethan turned one until the wax made a tiny ripple. A domestic gesture, nothing and everything. Madison sat opposite him, palms wrapped around her glass, not drinking, just holding it. "I used to be good at leaving the past outside," she said, "like wiping my shoes on a mat, but it keeps following me inside." "Your ex," he said. Not a question. She nodded once, tension sewing itself across her shoulders again. "Nick. He's charming when he wants something, and cruel when he doesn't get it. He's the kind of man who makes you question your own memory." She looked up as if bracing for judgment. "I stayed too long. I'm not going to pretend I didn't, but I have lines now." Ethan waited. The way she chose each word carefully felt like watching a person pick through broken glass to save the good pieces. "The night we left," she said, voice thinner. He threw a glass. "It wasn't at the kids. It wasn't at me." She narrowed her eyes as if trying to make the world believe the best version of the story. "It just shattered." And I looked at Ella and Owen and thought, they will grow up learning how to duck. And her voice caught. "I don't want that to be their superpower." Ethan looked at her, unmoving. "No one does." Somewhere upstairs, the house made an old house sound. Wood settling, water moving through pipes. Ethan glanced toward the stairwell. His own scar tissue rustled a hospital corridor. The sterile light when they told him too gently his wife wouldn't be coming home. The slow rewiring of a life lived in 3s and then 2. He knew the shape of empty rooms. He knew the cost of silence. "I don't scare easy," he said. "But I do take things seriously. If he shows up, we call the police." She made a face that wasn't a smile. "Paperwork doesn't stop fists. Neither does hiding," Ethan said. Her gaze flicked to the window. "I'm not good at asking for help." That might be the bravest sentence I've heard in a long time. Before she could answer, Her phone vibrated against the table, one buzz, then two, then three, persistent as a mosquito at night. The screen lit up, face down. She didn't flip it over, but her spine went rigid, and Ethan knew without looking whose name was flashing there. He gestured. "You can take it in the kitchen if you want." She shook her head once. "If I pick up, it means the lines are still open." The phone stopped. 2 breaths later, it started again. The room's warmth thinned. "Let me see," she said suddenly, more to herself than to him. She turned the phone. There was no name, just a number she knew too well. A few new texts stacked in the preview. "Where are my kids? You think you can run? Cute. Open the door." The last one made her hands tremble. Ethan had already stood. "He knows you're here?" "No," she said, voice soft with panic. "He shouldn't. I'm careful." He couldn't. Headlights rolled like a slow tide across the wall. They both froze. Ethan crossed to the window, barely parting the curtains. A dark SUV idled across the street. Engine low, predatory. The driver's silhouette sat back like a patient fisherman. No lights on inside, no movement, just presence. Madison had moved to his shoulder, her breath shallow. "Is it? I can't see his face," Ethan murmured, "but he's watching the house." "God," she whispered, taking a step back. Her phone buzzed again. "You were never as subtle as you think." She shut the screen off like that could silence reality. Ethan's mind shifted into a gear he hadn't used in a long time. He turned off the dining room lights, then the hallway light, until the house felt quieter, smaller, less visible. The candles hissed as he snuffed them with a spoon. He locked the back door, checked the garage. "Basement?" he asked. She nodded toward a door off the kitchen. "Unfinished, not cozy." "We're not here for cozy." He peered up the stairs, listening for the twins. Still asleep. He imagined Lucas behind his bedroom door, oblivious to the chessboard resetting downstairs. Madison stood in the kitchen's half-dark, hugging herself. "I didn't want to bring this here. I wanted to be the woman in the dress, not the woman who makes every room into a situation." "You can be both," he said, and didn't add that she already was. He handed her a set of spare keys from a ceramic bowl full of Lego pieces and rubber bands. "In case we need the car." "That your plan?" she said, trying for lightness and missing. "We do a fast and furious getaway in a Subaru?" "We do a smart and quiet if we have to," he said. "But first, we watch." They waited. The clock in the living room ticked like a metronome, anxious to speed up. Outside, the SUV didn't move. Madison's phone buzzed, then stopped, then buzzed again, a pattern meant to wear down protections. She placed it face down, then eventually slid it into a drawer like a sleeping snake she didn't trust. "Tell me about Lucas," she said abruptly, as if steering a car out of a skid. "What's he like?" Besides loud dinosaur toys, Ethan recognized the move for what it was anchoring. He exhaled, grateful for the lifeline. "He builds cities from shoeboxes and toilet paper rolls. He likes to measure things with my tape measure, and then lie about the numbers to make them cooler. He wears mismatched socks because color is important to the heart." He smiled, small and real. "He thinks his mother can hear him if he whispers into his pillow at night." Madison looked at the dark window, blinking faster. "Ella thinks clouds are letters God hasn't mailed yet." Owen lines up his toy cars like they're waiting at a red light in heaven. The silence that followed felt like two people laying pieces of themselves on a table. "Here, see, this is what I keep safe." A door clicked upstairs, one soft shift, then another. Little feet. Ethan turned and saw Lucas, hair sticking up, pajama shirt twisted, peeking around the banister with the dozy self-importance of kids who wake in a crisis they can't name. "Dad?" he whispered. "Did you hear the car?" Ethan went to the stairs and put a finger to his lips. Lucas patted down, eyes adjusting to the half-dark. And then he saw Madison. Curiosity overtook sleep like sunlight. "Hi," he said, serious as a judge. Madison, instantly gentle, crouched. "Hi, Lucas. I'm Madison. My kids are asleep in the guest room." He seemed to consider this, then nodded. as if filing it alphabetically in his mind. "There's a scary car outside," he announced, almost proud to have news. "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "We noticed." Lucas looked up at his father, reading the lines adults think they hide. "Do you want me to call Grandpa?" The instinct to accept surged through Ethan. His father would be here in 10 minutes with a baseball bat and bad ideas. He shook his head. "Not yet, bud. We're okay." Lucas nodded, trusting the answer, because that's what sons do until they learn otherwise. He turned to Madison, as if duty compelled him to reassure the guest. "You can sit on my step if you want. It's a lucky step. I always tie my shoes there, and I never fall at school." Something in Madison's face softened into awe. "Thank you, Lucas. That might be the nicest invitation I've had in years." Lucas plunked himself down 3 stairs up and patted the wood beside him. Madison actually went, sitting with her knees to the side, and it was absurdly tender, 2 people on a magic step guarding a night from becoming worse than it needed to be. The SUV's engine revved, then idled again. A test, a threat. Ethan's phone buzzed now unknown number. He stared at it, then answered, thumb hovering over the speaker, but not using it. "Hello?" A voice came slick and smooth, like oil poured slowly. "Good evening, Mr. Walker." Ethan didn't react outwardly, aware of 2 pairs of eyes on him. "Who is this?" "You know," the faux pleasant tone sharpened. "You have something of mine." "I don't own people," Ethan said. "And you don't either." A laugh, small and humorless. "You think this is a sanctuary? The suburbs?" "A different kind of jungle, friend. Laws are slower here. No witnesses." Ethan swallowed. "There are children asleep in this house. That's what concerns me," the voice said. "Mine, specifically. You're a father. I'm sure you understand. I need to see them. To ensure their mother hasn't been telling them stories. She brought them here because they deserve to sleep," Ethan said. "That's the story. Open the door," the voice said, all silk gone. "Or I call in a welfare check and explain that a stranger took my children across state lines." Madison's eyes flared. She mouthed, "He lies." Ethan's jaw flexed. "You want the police involved? Great. I'll call right now. We can discuss your restraining order while they're here." A pause. Then, softly, like a shadow leaning closer. "You don't know the rules yet, but you will." The line clicked dead. Madison let out a breath she'd been holding so long it came out as a shudder. Lucas squeezed her hand without words. And she squeezed back like she'd been waiting months to be anchored by a child's simple courage. Ethan dialed 907s. The voice on the other end was calm, measured. He explained the situation, gave the make of the SUV, the address, the existence of a restraining order. The operator asked for details. Madison answered where needed, quietly fierce. "Officers were on their way," she said. "Stay inside. Keep doors locked." After he hung up, time rearranged itself in small, careful squares. Madison sat on Lucas's step until his eyes fluttered shut again. She carried him up like a promise and tucked him in, pausing to look at a framed photo of a laughing woman with dark hair and Lucas at age 4, splashing in a fountain. Madison touched the frame gently. An apology and a blessing in one. Back downstairs, they stood by the front window in the darkness. Shoulder to shoulder but not touching. The SUV hadn't moved. The minutes stretched and thinned. Somewhere far off, a siren wound up, distant as a memory. "You okay?" Ethan asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "I hate that he can still pull strings in my body. My hands shake and I get small. I used to be big." Her mouth tightened. "He started with jokes that made me feel dumb, then rules that made me feel safe. Then, the house got quiet in a way that wasn't peace." "You left," Ethan said. "That's bigger than anything that came before." She swallowed. "He'll punish me for it." "He won't do it here," Ethan said. "Not in this house." The siren grew louder, nearer. The SUV's brake lights flared as if considering flight, then settled stubbornly. A minute later, Red and blue spilled over the street, like a broken kaleidoscope. 2 patrol cars rolled to the curb. Officers stepped out with the confident choreography of people who do this often enough to look like they're not afraid. "Stay here," Ethan said, and moved toward the door. Madison grabbed his sleeve. "Be careful." He turned his hand under hers and squeezed once. "I will." He stepped onto the porch, cool air drawing the house's warmth off his skin. An officer approached, a woman with her hair braided tight, eyes taking stock of everything at once. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Thanks for coming." She nodded toward the SUV. "That him?" "Likely," Ethan said. "He called me from an unknown number. Said he wants to see his kids. There's a restraining order. Madison has it in the house. We'll talk to him," the officer said, voice clipped, competent. She gestured to her partner, and they moved with caution toward the dark vehicle. Ethan stood on the top step, hands at his sides, breathing slow like he could set the metronome himself. The SUV's window slid down halfway. The man inside leaned just into the wash of cruiser light, handsome in the expensive, forgettable way of men who believe money can substitute for character. He smiled, and the smile never reached his eyes. The conversation was too far to hear, but the body language wrote its own transcript. The officers asked for ID. The man produced it slowly. He gestured toward the house. He shrugged, palms up. "See how reasonable I am?" The officers didn't move closer. One kept a hand near her belt, bored but ready. The man's smile thinned. He spread his arms as if to say, "Really?" The officers said something that narrowed his eyes into knives. His jaw worked. He handed something over. The officers inspected, conferred. One shook her head. The man's mouth tightened to a straight white line. Eventually, he rolled the window up and pulled away too slowly to count as a loss, too quickly to count as confidence. The SUV drifted down the street like a shark deciding to circle elsewhere. The officer returned to the porch. "He's gone for now," she said. "We advised him to leave the area and reminded him of the restraining order's terms. He's not legally permitted to be within 500 feet of Miss Cole or the children." "He'll be back," Madison said from the doorway. She hadn't stayed inside after all. She stood in the frame, small and unyielding. The officer looked at her with the steady kindness of someone who has seen this script too many times. "Then call us again. Document everything. We'll file a report tonight. Do you have somewhere else you can stay?" Madison looked at Ethan. The question hung between them like a test. He answered it with his whole face. "Yes," he said. "Here." The officer scanned them both, as if measuring whether this was safety or romantic bravado. "Okay, keep your doors locked. We'll do a few extra passes on this block tonight. If he comes back, you call, even if you think it's nothing." "Thank you," Madison said. Her voice had its steel back. They watched the cruisers roll away. The street swallowed the red and blue like a mouth closing. The night grew large again, and the house felt like a small boat on it. Inside, the quiet wasn't so brittle now. It felt like cloth you could wrap around your shoulders. Madison leaned against the wall near the window, closed her eyes, and pressed the heels of her hands into them until stars danced. When she looked at Ethan, he was already looking at her, and there was something in his expression, not just protective but recognizing, like two refugees meeting on the same shore. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice low. "About us staying? I'd rather know you're safe than spend the night wondering if you are," he said. "That's selfish, maybe. But it's true." 1,000 choices fluttered in the air between them. The smallest one was the one he made. He took a step closer. She didn't step back. "Why did you really come tonight?" he asked. "Honestly." Her laugh was soft, disbelieving. "Because your messages made me feel like I was still a woman, and not just a mother and a problem set." She lifted her shoulders. "Because you said you liked the way I described the ocean as a bad listener but a great friend. Who remembers lines like that?" She shook her head. "Because I needed to try, at least once, to put on a dress and be the version of myself that exists in some other story." He nodded, as if cataloging the answer into a blueprint he could build from. "Okay." "Okay," she echoed, teasing, a hint of the earlier playfulness returning like embers catching. "Okay," he said, softer now. "We keep going." They stood too close and not close enough. He could smell her shampoo. She could hear his breathing. The house was full of sleeping children and shadows and a siren still fading at the edge of memory. To kiss or not to kiss felt like a decision with ripples. Both wanted it. Both feared the heat it would add to a night that already had too much. Madison touched his wrist instead. The smallest contact, precise and careful. "Thank you," she said again. But this time it meant 1,000 things. For dinner, for candles, for turning off lights, for calling help, for seeing me. He turned his hand, and their fingers laced. Shyly, like teenagers believing in magic, because it hadn't been disproved yet. Upstairs, a door creaked. Ella's small voice floated down like a feather. "Mom?" Madison squeezed his hand once and moved toward the stairs. At the landing, she paused, looked back with a smile that contained an apology and a promise, then disappeared into the hallway. Ethan listened to her whisper in the guest room, just words that soothe. The universal incantations mothers know. He turned off the last of the lights and sat on the couch in the dark, letting his eyes adjust to the soft geometry of his living room. The house felt different now, as if its bones had shifted to make room. He thought of his wife and said her name in his head like a benediction, not an apology. "I think you'd like her," he told the silence. "I think you'd tell me not to hold back my life and call it loyalty." He ran a hand through his hair, breath finally slowing, when something caught his attention, a glint by the front door, barely there. He stood, moved closer. The porch light threw a faint amber glow through the glass. On the welcome mat, half in shadow, lay a single black leather glove. He hadn't seen it when he spoke to the officers. He hadn't seen it when they drove away. He opened the door carefully, stayed inside the threshold, and stared at the glove. It wasn't old. It wasn't dropped accidentally. It lay fingers pointed toward the door, like a gesture. Ethan crouched, pulse ticking faster again. He reached out, then stopped. On the cuff, pressed hard enough to leave a pattern in the leather, were the faint ridges of a ring. Not a wedding band. A signet. He didn't know what the symbol was. Something sharp, 2 letters intertwined. He straightened and shut the door quietly, engaged the deadbolt, and stood there with his hand on the wood, listening to the night breathe on the other side. Upstairs, Madison's whisper settled into silence. The house exhaled. Ethan lifted the glove with a paper towel and set it on the kitchen counter like evidence. He took a photo. He told himself it was nothing, a drop, a clumsy threat. He told himself the police would know what to do with it. But the truth slid under those thoughts, slick and certain. The man in the SUV was gone. The man who left the glove had been closer. And somewhere outside, in a dark street that had promised safety, footsteps retreated with a patience that felt personal. Ethan turned off his phone's screen and stood alone in the kitchen's dim light, the house full of sleeping hearts he had already decided to protect. The decision wasn't loud. It didn't flare with trumpets. It was the quiet click of a blueprint, locking into place. He didn't see Madison watching him from the hallway, her hand on the banister, eyes darker than before. She had seen the glove. She had also seen something else, the way his shoulders squared, the way his gaze steadied, the way he took fear and laid it in a row with other tasks to be done. She let herself breathe. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like the only adult in her own story. Down the block, a porch light winked out. The wind moved the trees into a soft, warning hush. In the morning, they would make breakfast like this was a house that had only ever been about pancakes and backpacks. In the afternoon, they would talk about lawyers and locks, plans and the way children learn resilience. In the evening, they might laugh, because life has the indecency to keep offering lovely things even when you're not sure you deserve them. But for now, the night was not finished with them. It had one more turn to play. The glove on the counter looked back at Ethan with its empty shape, a hand without a man. He leaned on his palms, steady, listening, and heard it at last, not a sound, not an engine, but a feeling, the kind you get when someone who knows your name steps just outside the circle of light and waits. He lifted his head. If fear was a room, he would furnish it. If love was a risk, he would sign the liability waiver. He turned toward the hallway just as Madison stepped fully into view, the twins' soft breathing collapsing into the comfortable chorus of sleeping children. Their eyes met and held. "We're not running," he said. "No," she said. "We're not." From the street, as if the night disliked being denied the last word, a single car horn blipped short, mocking, "Gone." Ethan didn't flinch. He reached past the glove, opened a drawer, and took out a small notebook he used for measurements and grocery lists. He wrote down the time, the details, the tiny things that make big cases stand up straight. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a soldier. He was a man with a house and a son and a woman whose eyes asked to believe. Sometimes that was enough to begin. He set the pen down and looked up at Madison again. "Coffee?" he asked. And the normalcy of the word made both of them exhale a laugh they hadn't meant to give. "Only if it's decaf," she said, and that single practical boundary folded the night into a shape they could carry. He put water on. The kettle was old. It sang a friendly, tired song. The house listened. The glove Saturday. The dark kept its own counsel, and somewhere outside, in a car or on a sidewalk, or behind a low hedge trimmed to homeowners association standards, a man who believed the world was his to arrange learned something he didn't like. There are doors that won't open just because he asks. The kettle clicked off. Madison stepped close enough that their shoulders brushed, casual and monumental. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for the first time, not for the last." Ethan poured. The night moved. The story tightened. And in the quiet between fear and mourning, the scaffolding of something new, fragile, stubborn, necessary, rose one beam higher. The morning light spilled across the kitchen like forgiveness. Steam rose from 2 half-finished cups of coffee. The night had drained them both, but not broken them. Ethan stood by the sink, watching through the window as the world carried on, neighbors, walking dogs, a delivery truck groaning past. The ordinary rhythm of a day that didn't know danger had slept inside this house. Madison came down the stairs, barefoot, her hair tied back, eyes clearer than before. She looked at him for a long moment, then at the glove, still sealed inside a plastic bag on the counter. "He's gone," she said, more to test the sentence than believe it. "For now," Ethan replied. "The police will send someone to take the evidence. They'll put a car near the block for a few days." Madison nodded, then exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to." He smiled faintly. "You just have to stay safe." She stepped closer. "You make that sound easy." "It's not, but it's possible." A noise upstairs interrupted them, tiny footsteps, followed by giggles. The twins ran in wearing Lucas's spare pajamas, still too big for them. Lucas followed behind, sleepy but grinning. "We made pancakes," Ella declared proudly, "mostly with flour, everywhere." Ethan laughed, and for the first time in years, the sound felt alive, real, not rehearsed. Madison covered her face, laughing too, tears slipping between her fingers. When she looked up, he saw the shimmer of hope there, fragile but refusing to die. "I can't promise my life isn't a mess," she said quietly. "But if you still want dinner someday without fear in the room." Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I'd like that." They stood there, surrounded by sunlight, the smell of burnt flour, and the chatter of children plotting another round of chaos. Outside, a police car cruised past slowly. The world, at least for this morning, was calm. Madison leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "I almost didn't knock on your door." He smiled, eyes soft. "Then I'm glad you did." And somewhere beyond the quiet street, the storm that had shadowed her for years finally lost its power, leaving behind only light, laughter, and the faint sound of pancakes sizzling on a clean pan.